Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
I'm Kim Flatham.
And I'm Kirsten Traynor.
Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sherry. We really appreciate our sponsors. Without it, we would have a difficult time bringing you the podcast on a weekly basis. With that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. And while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinator insects. Learn more from our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor and our guest co-host Kirsten Traynor, and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We're glad you're here. Kim's not with us today, and we'll be back next week for our interview with Maureen and Raphael from the American Honey Tasting Society. So it's just Kirsten and me for this episode. Hey Kirsten.
Hey Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good. It's definitely October in Washington State. How's it there in Berlin?
It is cool and wet, and I probably don't have enough warm clothes since my washing machine just overshrank my one really nice sweater. It ran hotter than I was expecting.
Well, you know, probably Berlin's a good place to pick up some good clothing, so you're probably in a good place.
Yeah, I'm sure. I just have to find the time.
Well, so speaking of time, how's your research going?
It's going really well. We have the observation hive going. It's a preliminary trial, and so I added about 400 Varroa compromised bees, so bees that were reared with Varroa in the cell, and then I have about 500 plus of control bees. And these are all bees that I received from a commercial beekeeper. I got 9 frames of brood from them. They'd come up from the Black Forest and had not yet been treated for Varroa. So the colony still looked really nice and healthy. They were 9 frames from a variety of colonies, and I gave them a queen. And so we shall see. The Varroa bees are definitely dying off faster than the uncompromised bees.
And how's that robo bee dancing going?
That's been put on hold. So our engineer is currently on a special 10-month program in Antarctica. And so we're waiting for his replacement to arrive. And so that project is currently on hold.
All right. Hey, so Kirsten, you know, we receive occasionally we receive audio postcards from our past guests, and this week we received one from Dr. Fiona Edwards of Apis Protect, and she wanted to let us know about a product announcement release that she had mentioned earlier. So let's listen to it now.
Hi, Jeff and Kim. It's Fiona Edwards-Murphy here from Apis Protect, calling you from Ireland. Last time we spoke was March of this year, which was just before the world changed more than a little bit. So we've been really busy since then over here in Ireland, working remotely and finalising our technology. And now we are delighted to announce that our bee monitoring technology is now available to beekeepers in the United States. What we're looking for at the moment is commercial beekeepers who are interested in using technology to help improve the outcomes in their beekeeping operations to come on board with us at Apis Protect. We've spent the last 2 years developing this technology in conjunction with commercial beekeepers all across the United States. And now we can provide highly accurate insights to deliver more hives and stronger hives from your operation, while also increasing profitability. We add an additional $98 of value per hive per season. And our technology provides real-time hive monitoring and delivers a 24/7 early warning system about the at-risk hives. We give beekeepers actionable information to help prevent losses and increase colony productivity. If you're interested in finding out a bit more about our technology or coming on board for a pilot test, you can email us at inquiries, that's inquiries with an E, at apesprotect.com, and we can help organize a call with myself and with our Chief Science Officer, Dr. Patrick Whelan, who came on me with the podcast earlier this year. And what we'd be happy to do is go through our technology in detail, highlight the value, help identify the value that it can bring to your operation, whatever kind of operation you run. So we'd love if you could stay in touch and remember to sign up to our monthly newsletter at www.apesprotect.com. And what we do love doing there is providing updates on beekeeping all across the world. So bye and stay well, and hope to see you soon. Bye.
Hey, thanks for that audio postcard, Fiona. Hey, Kirsten, she gave a great presentation last week at the Hive and Colony Monitoring Conference that was going on, hosted by Jerry Bromenshank. It's pretty exciting stuff going on in the hive monitoring and all that tracking. It's pretty good.
I would imagine so. I was very sad that I wasn't able to make it, but it's just been a crazy few weeks with work. And I always enjoy listening to Hugh rattle off on all the high-tech advances. Yeah, the presentations have been pretty phenomenal, and the science that's going into studying bees always amazes me, and all the energy that goes into studying bees, as you well experience, is always surprising, and I'm glad it's going on. Yes, and often it takes a lot of time and dedication to get some of these high-tech projects off the ground. Well, you're talking about sitting there and pulling individual varroa off of bees is sounds like a lot of dedication and a lot of time. All right. Hey, so you speaking of research and beekeepers, you had who do you have for us today? I had a chance to sit down with Michael Smith. He did his Ph.D. with Tom Seeley in Cornell. He's currently in Konstanz in the southern part of Germany, where he's working with the same tracking system I'm using here in Berlin, except he does it on a 3-frame observation hive. And so he's very interested in comb dynamics and how bees process information and make decisions about building a nest structure. That's really cool. Anybody who's dealt with wild comb and watching bees pull out comb, it's fascinating to see, but to know that someone's actually researching that part to see how that's done, decided, moved, this will be a fun interview. Yeah, that was always my favorite part. I don't like running a top bar hive, but I did have one, and it was always fascinating to see how they would transition from worker comb to drone comb, and letting the bees build comb under their own building characteristics rather than off foundation. I did find interesting. Yeah, very cool. Well, let's get to your interview with Michael Smith, and just before we do that, let's just take care of a little business, and we'll go right into the interview.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalk brood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbial's Super DFM Honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Michael Smith, currently a postdoc at the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior in Konstanz, Germany. He'll be returning to the States this fall to start up his own research lab at Auburn in Alabama. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here.
It's very
like virtually here, not humanly here.
You mean we're not socially in the same room, like breathing on one another?
No, I've avoided. I don't breathe in public anymore,
That's very, very wise. You must just stay in the lab and in your own apartment so that you can continue to be alive.
yeah, it's working out for me so far, at least.
Well, this is good. So I've known you for quite a long time, and I first met you a few years back at an EAS show in Delaware, where you showed up on a tandem bike with your girlfriend wearing flip-flops and your trademark leather fanny pack. So if you had to pick, bees or bike?
Oh, that's a no-brainer. You got to go bees.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you going to pick a bike over bees?
All right. You're never without a bike. So, I was a little worried you might say bike.
So actually, okay, to put that into perspective though, I actually had 2 tandem bicycles, which is 2 more than anyone needs. But when I moved from the US to Germany to do the postdoc, I moved here to work with bees, but I left the bikes behind. I actually sold those tandem bicycles. So
that is true
right there
dedication.
is already. And when I actually moved over here, it was actually the Max Planck Institute of Ornithology.
Okay.
So, people were, when I told family and friends, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to the ornithology. And they're like, you're leaving the bees? I was like, no, don't worry about that. Like it's ornithology only in name. The lab, works with everything from zebras, Drosophila, honeybees, locusts. To be really honest, like even when we were in ornithology, I think like the number of people actually working with birds was very low.
Interesting. So it must have started with ornithology and then it umbrellaed into all these other much more interesting organisms.
Yeah, well, I think it is cool to have an institute that's devoted to like we're studying this organism and all aspects of the organism. But gosh, how many years was the Ornithology Institute around? I mean, it just starts to balloon out and kind of grow. And then they actually did eventually split. So we at Konstanz and Mogingen near Radolfzell, we split and became the animal behavior one. Okay. And the one in Stuyvesant became the ornithology one.
Very
which I
cool.
think is really nice. Yeah. So I'm definitely bees over bikes, bees over birds. I'm not even sure why people say the birds and the bees, because I would just say the bees and the bees.
This is true. Or maybe I'd give it the butterflies some credit, but that's just me.
Yeah, or maybe just bees and flowers, because I mean that actually would probably get the mating
sexual
thing.
Interaction. Yeah.
Yeah. So. I also would avoid using honeybee mating systems to explain reproduction to children. I think that probably would be a little misleading.
You mean you mean you wouldn't want to promote all that promiscuity to young children? You're very narrow-minded, Michael. I'm totally teasing.
Like Frank, when you grow up, you might want to mate a single time and then you'll die. I think would be a little. I mean, that's just hard for a kid to take upon themselves.
Fair enough.
I think. Yeah.
So how did you get into bees? What's your bee origin story?
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, it's. I mean, I think everyone's got a weird story. Mine was I was actually in Wales at boarding school for 2 years.
Okay.
And I randomly met this guy in a hallway. His name was Chris Adam. He's a really nice, like super, Welsh guy, great dude. And so I met this guy and he was giving someone a jar of honey. And like, I saw him and I was like, are you a beekeeper? Because I've always wanted to keep bees. And I preemptively loved bees. And I don't even really know why. I mean, I just was like really drawn to them, but I grew up in Panama where of course the bees are Africanized. So you couldn't really keep bees in your backyard.
Okay.
So I met this guy and I gave him my information and I was like, please, like, I'd love to see your bees. I'd love to go with you to I'll be a flunky. I'll carry whatever. I'll do whatever you want. And he lost my information. He lost a piece of paper with my name on it.
Oh no.
But then a couple of weeks later, he actually saw me on the BBC.
Why were you on the BBC?
I was on the BBC because we were setting the world record for the most number of nationalities in a swimming pool at the same time.
This is so you.
I know. It's actually very, but then, so, this is like the white elephant thing that they show at the end of like the BBC Nightly. And it's like Michael Smith. And like, he's like, oh, that's that kid. So then he wrote me an old fashioned letter with some material, some beekeeping materials. And then I immediately got back in touch with him. And then he showed me his bees. And actually together we started a beekeeping club at the school.
Okay.
Which was great. And that's actually how I like first got my beekeeping stuff going. And then I continued beekeeping in college.
So it's only because you were trying to break a world record that you're in bees?
I would say it's because I was in that hallway watching a guy hand a jar of honey to someone else. And because if it had been a minute later, I like to think I would have always eventually fallen into bees because I did actually have this interest in bees and beekeeping.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really lucky. And for Chris to be, you get some random kid to be like, I'm super excited about bees. And then him to actually be like, okay, I will follow up and actually encourage this, which is nice.
And what's it like keeping bees in Wales? It's not the driest climate.
No, it's not. It's not the driest climate. And, and to be honest, the academic school year at a boarding school is also not the best for beekeeping either.
No.
Just because, students are away during the summer. But, we were able to get a small harvest. We were able to have a couple colonies. It worked out really nicely.
Okay.
Welsh beekeepers are kind of international or not independent crowd.
I
So
think
there's actually some evidence
beekeepers in general are very independent.
Okay, but Welsh guys. Well, I feel like I cannot speak for the Welsh beekeepers. But yeah, I'm a big fan. Yeah, me and Chris and I, we still keep in touch, regularly. We've seen each other in different places. And yeah, I think he has a very hands-off beekeeping approach.
Okay.
Which actually I think suited me well as, going into biology and kind of understanding the way organisms work as opposed to what we are doing as beekeepers that maybe kind of mess things up or switch things around.
Okay. And is this beekeeping club still around?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And it would have been started in 2005.
Okay.
Wow. So they had their 15-year anniversary. But yeah, not too shabby.
Oh.
So, but that was getting into beekeeping.
Right.
To then get into bee research was the other kind of hoop to jump through. And that was with Heather Madela at Wellesley College.
You were at Wellesley?
Yeah, so that's all women's.
I know.
So
How did you sneak in? I know you sometimes let your hair grow a little longer, and I've never seen you wear a skirt, but I think you'd have a hard time passing as a girl's girl.
Yeah, I would have I think I'd have a bit of trouble. Both of my sisters went to Wellesley.
Okay.
And I have a very soft spot for, I just think Wellesley's a pretty awesome place. But the long and the short of it was basically I was visiting my sister. She was working in the bee lab. And of course, I go in there and I'm just like, oh my God, I love bees. And Heather probably was like, this guy is a little too weird. Because, we had a nice conversation. We chatted about bees and stuff. And, she's like, okay, well, obviously last I checked, you're not a lady and you're not a student at Wellesley. So, you can just carry on with your life.
Yeah.
And I did. I carried on with my life. But then that summer, just by chance, she had not one, but two student assistants that basically just up and left. They just quit from one day to the next.
Oh, wow.
And so then Heather was like, hey, Annie, my sister, she's like, is your brother available to come on a dime to do bee work? And I was actually in Panama at the time. And, she emailed me like, hey, can you come do bee work? And within 48 hours, I was on a plane to go work for Heather. Because it was exactly that. I was that insane, or not insane. I think I was just really curious and interested and really wanted to do it. And so when I had the opportunity, I was like, oh yeah, I don't care what I'm doing. I'm going for it.
Okay. And you survived your first summer and you're still doing bee research. So
at that point she needed a flunky. She needed someone who could lug boxes, move things around, inspect colonies. And that's what I was doing. And then also was able to get involved in some research projects, which was great. And yeah, Heather, 5-star. Heather's a 5-star person in my book. Okay, so I'm a
very
big fan.
cool. Yeah, the people who are always willing to take a chance on you. I have a soft spot in my heart for them. So
yeah, she's a good egg.
So how from faking it at a girls' school, you ended up.
Well, okay, I don't mean to correct you. But it is not a girls' school.
All right,
it is a women's college.
It is a women's college. I apologize. You're absolutely right.
And I only have to say that because Yeah, because I mean, someone's like, "Oh, you go to a girls' school." I mean, okay, if it's like a grade school, fair enough. But no, like these are
Oh no, the college is
badass women.
awesome. I wasn't knocking it in that way. I meant you pretending to be a woman for the summer, which I know you weren't.
Yeah. Well, actually, when I would visit my sister, so I visit my sister like just to hang out, or she'd come down to visit me in college and stuff. And when I would go visit her, she'd be like, "Okay, I'm going to class," and like would like leave me in a library somewhere. And so I'm just like sitting there like working, just waiting for my sister to get out of class. And they had the police were called on me. There's this rando guy. And they came up, they're like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm waiting for my sister to get out of class." And that's just, that's normal, right? And they're like, "Well, it's kind of weird for there to be a guy." And then coincidentally, and this, 100%, this was not me, but there was apparently a streaker around that time. So they were actually concerned about I mean, rightfully
was
so.
out in the library.
No, I mean, I think it was just a streaker generally,
Yeah.
but my sister was like, "Michael, there's a streaker." And you visit occasionally to we kind of like visit to hang out. But I was definitely cleared because the streaker struck when I was not around. So,
okay.
So that is,
you were
I was
safe.
in the clear.
I
was safe.
You had a very ironclad, well-clothed alibi.
Yes. Yeah. No, definitely. But yeah, no. So yeah, but yes, you can have the police called on you for being having an XY combination at Wellesley unaccompanied. So
okay, this is they're watching out for their residents. I get it.
No, as they should, and I don't I always felt super welcome at Wellesley. I love that place. I love the lab. The people were great. It's
an absolutely gorgeous campus.
Yes. Yeah, and Heather's got a beautiful spot right near the greenhouses.
Okay.
For her bees. The only caveat of it is that people go by and they're like, they think that you're like part of like an instructional, like they think that you're part of like the lab tour. So you'll be doing an experiment and someone's like, "Oh, like, can I talk to you about that experiment?" And you're like, yes. At the same time, like, if you were like an accountant, I wouldn't come through and be like, "Oh, you're using Excel. Like, can I get in on there and check out your Excel spreadsheet?" But yeah, I mean,
bees are so much cooler than numbers.
That is true. I think so, at least for the most part.
So you're you just, you have a hive open and somebody walks by, if they're not terrified, they want to come take a peek. So.
Yeah. And I think that's a good, I think inherently people are kind of drawn into this, like, cool. Yeah. I mean, what's not to like?
Exactly. What's not to like? So you ended up at Cornell, and what were you doing there? How did you get in and what were you doing?
I got in probably by a mistake on their part. They were probably slipped through the cracks. So I got into Cornell to work with Tom Seeley, which was also just a phenomenal experience. That was really a really great lab to be in. A small lab, really dedicated, and just really interesting place to work. And Tom had this really nice thing where he would basically kind of let you do whatever project you wanted to do and kind of build your own program within the umbrella of social insects, bees, what have you. And so within that kind of just like broad framework and support, I settled on the concept of how individual bees are detecting the size of their colony and how that relates to drone comb investment. So Of course, honeybee colonies invest in drone comb only after a certain point in their colony development. And then the question is, how do the bees recognize that their colony can, like, quote unquote, afford that reproductive investment? And it turns out that it has to do, so we always knew that large colonies invested in drone comb sooner, but large and small colonies, if you think of a large colony and a small colony, yeah, they're larger in terms of more individuals, but they're also larger in every single possible metric. So they have more brood, they have more honey stores, they have more comb, they have more everything.
Their bees are sometimes bigger.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, it's like if you're bigger, you're everything bigger.
Yeah.
But the question was, the first one that we kind of needed to get to was what aspect of bigger was the important bigger thing. And that was actually just number of workers. So they're in some way they're assessing literally the number of workers in the colony. And so then following from that was kind of figuring, okay, how do you as a bee recognize that there are 5,000 bees in this nest versus 10,000 bees?
Right.
And it looks like they're somehow using density to do that.
Okay.
But we still, it's kind of like a Russian doll thing. Like you come up to one conclusion, okay, it's number of workers. So then you open up like, okay, well, how do they detect number of workers? Okay, it has to do with density. But then you're like, okay, well, how do they detect density?
Right.
And I don't know. I have ideas of how they detect density, but I don't actually know how they do that. But we know it has something to do with density, and it has to do with number of workers. It's how they make that decision to invest in the reproductive drone comb for the colony.
So if you were looking at drone comb drawing, do we really mess them up when we do intensive drone comb cutting for varroa control? Or is it like harvesting honey? They're like, where'd it go? Oh, we better make more.
Yeah, I mean, they will, you can, if you keep taking it, they will keep making it.
Yeah.
And as a beekeeper, because, okay, I always think, I am both a beekeeper and a bee researcher.
Yeah.
The bee research becomes before the beekeeper. Like, if you're a good bee researcher, you are probably not a good beekeeper.
No, because you have to do some pretty nasty things sometimes to figure questions out.
Yeah. So, but, we, on the beekeeper side, we always just think like, oh gosh, these gals are just constantly building drone comb.
Yeah.
But they also have systems to actually keep from building too much. And so if they're over, 20, 25% drone comb in the colony, they actually will then actively not build drone comb.
Right.
So, when we think of it as like, oh gosh, like, these bees always building bits of drone comb everywhere and in between frames and everything else. If you actually just give them the drone comb that they want, they actually will not keep doing that. So it's really, you're kind of playing a whack-a-mole when you're just constantly cutting out drone comb. And then the other thing is it means that they have to actually secrete the wax and actually build those combs. So, in some way,
I don't know. There's a theory, it hasn't really been tested, but that drawing waxes actually helps them detoxify.
Huh. Really?
Yeah.
That's cool. So who's doing that?
It hasn't been tested yet, but so the idea is sort of that it's a little bit like, it's kind of like sweating.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm a science, I'll believe it when I see it, but at the same time,
concur. Yeah.
But yeah, I do wonder, because also there's a very specific time in a bee's life where they do secrete wax. But it could be, but
we do know that when old combs act as sort of toxic sponges, right? And so colonies where you're forcing them to draw out wax on a regular basis tend to have less pesticide concentrations throughout. And so they tend to do better, and brood tends to be more viable. But yeah, so it's fascinating.
Yeah, but even when you think of a natural nest, there is an upper limit of, technically there could not be a colony could technically, live forever if, they constantly requeen successfully and they constantly maintain them and they survive the winters. But realistically, there is, an upper limit for a natural nest cavity.
Right.
So you would actually expect cavities to kind of be overturned.
Yeah. And wax moth would then come in and help clean things up.
Yeah. Yeah. Good old wax moths. Yeah.
They're they're kind of nasty. So you've done some pretty quirky things in life, and including investigating who steals from a honey stand. What did you find out?
Yes. Oh man. We found out that people are jerks. But not as many. Yeah, there are jerks in the world, but not as many as maybe you would think.
Yeah.
This was basically, we had. Yeah.
Somebody actually carted off your whole honey stand at one point.
Yeah. So we had a lot of. So this was a summer. We did a honey harvest, and it was like, okay, we have all this honey. Let's sell the honey at a little roadside stand. And of course, it's Tom and the 3 graduate students, and we're like, okay, none of us are going to just sit out there just all day and just sell honey. So we just had an honor system where you have your jar of honey, and it's $10 a jar. And it was like a pound of honey, over a pound of honey. So it's was it a pound? It was one of those, those mason jar ones. I think it was a pound. But, and so we were taking, kind of naturally taking data on just like putting out jars and bringing in cash. So then I actually made these little data sheets where we would actually put in like, okay, who it is, what time you put it out, what time you brought it in, how many jars you put out, how many jars you put in, how much money you had, how many jars were stolen, how many were partially paid for, any kind of notes. And so we use these data to then look at things like, okay, are you more likely to get robbed during the week versus the weekend? And no, we were just as equally likely to get robbed in the week as on the weekend. But then we also did days of the week, and it seemed like Saturday for some reason was, a high theft day on a Saturday. And then, another one of the things was that.
What about Sunday mornings? Did your churchgoers rip you off?
No, I don't. I mean, I guess I wonder. I don't know if you're on your way to church or on the way back from church, you're like, you know what, I should wait until Monday, or I should have stolen this yesterday. So one of the other things we found though was that earlier in the season, we were more likely to get robbed from than later. So this was just, if you looked at a per day, we had higher rates of theft early on. And I think the thing I kind of took from that was that, you have people that they're not going to buy your honey no matter what, they're just going to steal it. And so when the stand first went up, they kind of stole a jar or two or whatever.
Right.
But then they have honey, so then they don't need to steal it again.
Okay.
And then another thing that we also did was actually put out little info sheets. So we had a control sheet that just had the price versus we had one that was about bees or about honey or about the scientific research. And actually, if we put out a little note that was about the research and hey, we're a science lab and we're doing this research and this helps support the research, we actually saw lower rates of theft.
People have a conscience. Yeah.
I think the whole thing of it is that, you look at this jar and you're like, okay, do I want to pay for this jar? But when you kind of see that there's a person behind it, it makes it harder to just walk away and just steal it. So that actually did help a bit. But, in all these cases, we're talking about things 15% theft rate versus maybe 8% theft. So it's is it that much? But then that's just stealing the honey. But we did have a couple cases of people actually going after the cash in the cash box. So that was one case, probably the most radical one. And there's a photo of this in the article, but it was basically some jerk in a truck basically lifted the entire honey stand, just the whole thing, and just threw it in the back of the truck. But there were some Dutch tourists that were in the car behind. And so they see these people and they're like, that's not right. And so they actually took a photo of this truck, and you can see the honey stand in the back of the truck, and you can see the license plate. And the license plate is published in the American Bee Journal. So that person doesn't know that their license plate is, they're on the wanted list. And sure enough, we submitted that to the Cornell police. But the problem is that, without a photograph of literally the person's face, they could say, well, who was it and everything. And it was a woman who she had lent her truck to someone else. And so it was then him, he was a suspect, but he was actually already wanted for other questioning. So it just adds to the list. But so for the beekeepers out there, it's worth it to actually change your stand down. And also, if you are going to try to press charges and these kinds of things, you want to make sure that you can somehow get a photo of their face, because that's what you actually need. But then even after chaining it down, someone took a crowbar and also opened up our little lockbox. Which,
wow.
It's like a little lockbox. I mean, how much were you expecting to get? 10, 20, $30? But the stupidest part was that you could actually look into the lockbox to see if there was cash, and it was completely empty.
So you just ruined the box for...
Yeah, you just ruined the box. It's like, dude, should we have given you a flashlight so you could actually inspect it? And these are all the bad things, but it's also to say that 90% of people paid in full, no questions asked, and just, that was great. And I remember one day going to the box, and this was before we actually even had a lockbox. It was just an open canister so you could make yourself change.
Right.
And there was $100 bill at the top. So
this is where you started wondering if you were a poorly paid graduate student.
I mean, I mean, actually, that is one of the things we actually did test. One of the things, and this is kind of fun, was because we could tell who was putting out the jars. I was like, okay, let's find out. Is one of us actually stealing the money on the sly?
Right.
So I actually compared the rates of theft for each person, and it luckily, I mean, that would not have been a comfortable conversation to have, but everyone was experiencing the same rates of theft. So either we were all skimming equally, or no one was stealing. Yeah. So that was fine, but that was good. Yeah. But yeah, that's like a fun side. That was a fun side project. And it was the kind of thing where it's like, okay, you can write that up on your weekends or in the evenings or whatever.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah, it was just enjoyable.
I mean, I was impressed by the data you had collected on honey thefts. But I mean, in the long run, I'm sure you guys ended up saving money by not having somebody sit there. So even though you have some theft, you're not losing all those hours of monitoring your honey stand.
No, and if we were really going to be someone that was like more into it, you could certainly, lock things down, have a stronger lockbox. You could actually have a camera there to see like, hey, look, we will, we will find you if you steal. But at the same time, it's like, you
got to have some
selling
trust
honey was not
in your local neighborhood.
And it's also, that was not, we're there to do research. We're not there to make money off of honey. So, it's fine. But yeah, it's a fun little project. Why not?
Better Bee is pleased to present the interviews by Kirsten Traynor. As a supplier to our nation's beekeepers for over 40 years, Better Bee provides the tools, equipment, and information you need to succeed. Through its many beekeeping employees, Better Bee serves you with solutions to your beekeeping challenges. That's why they can say with confidence that they are your partners in better beekeeping. Thanks to Better Bee for their informative catalog, website, supportive beekeeper education, and for sponsoring the series featuring Kirsten. Be sure to see the latest at betterbee.com.
What brought you to Germany, and how did you end up in Germany, and what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I'm here in Ian Cousin's lab. Mm-hmm. So he's professor, director of the Max Planck Institute for Animal Behavior, and super collective behavior guy. And I basically got in touch with him. I was like, hey, what do you think about bees? And Ian, like, bless him. He is super supportive about, if it's an interesting question, if it's, you come to him, you're like, I'm interested in doing this. It's like, great. And he is ready to support it and do it and just like kind of go whole hog. And yeah, so I was fortunate to receive a fellowship from the Simons Foundation via the Life Sciences Research Foundation, which basically paid my salary. Nice. And then was able to come here for a 3-year postdoc. And yeah, so, I came over here interested in kind of using some of these new automated tracking techniques, so developed by the Landgraf Lab. So I'm using the BEESBOOK tracking system, which has been a great collaboration with Tim Landgraf and his group because, I'm more a bee guy than an automated tracking guy, but it's been really nice to work with a group that's supportive and kind of like we can all, I can help generate data and they can help with like the training the models and actually getting it to work because,
you're a bee guy. Not
I have learned a lot. Yeah. I've definitely learned. I've learned a lot in these 3 years. Compared to Michael 3 years ago, like Michael of today is a computer whiz.
Yeah.
Things are, computers aren't going anywhere. Let's put it that way.
They're only getting faster and more incorporated into our life.
But being able to use some of these tools to answer biological questions has always been interesting. And so then the project that I proposed to Ian was, basically probably like the most boring thing you could do with the fanciest equipment available, which was, it's like, hey, why don't we do this really potentially? So it was pretty much just tagging and watching bees throughout their entire lives.
Okay.
And that definitely, if someone says that sounds silly or not very interesting, I'm like, hey, that's your opinion. But it kind of comes out of Martin Lindauer in 1952 published this paper where he pretty much basically just hand watched a bee for 7.5 hours a day and just by hand was logging what the bee was doing and where she was and all this kind of stuff.
This is the world's longest observed bee ever.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, gosh, is it B Blue 107? I think was the number. I always forget. I think it was B107. And so, yeah, so he watched this bee throughout her life for 24 days for 7.5 hours a day. And so this project is really kind of inspired by that and kind of a semi-logical continuation where we then say, okay, well, we can use automated tracking technology to actually watch lots of bees throughout their lives. And although we can't necessarily get the same resolution of like this bee is inspecting this cell, these are the contents, we can get a much bigger picture of what these individuals are doing throughout their lives with this automated tracking system. And so what we're trying to get at is looking at how the bees are changing where they are in the nest and how they're changing the way they're moving in the nest as they age.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's definitely on the descriptive side, but I'm not opposed to descriptive work. I think it's really interesting and important to have descriptive work to build upon.
Well, you come out of a Seeley Foundation, of course. I remember having a conversation with him, and the thing he said to me is, you always have to observe and understand before you tinker.
That's a great. Yeah, the one that I'd always heard was also Walter Schinkel. So he's an ant guy, and he was what was the exact phrase was something along the lines of, every biological study should, and he emphasizes the should, begin with a thorough description of the phenomena.
Okay. And
he has a couple papers about sociometry and like basically the idea that these social insect researchers really kind of jumping a couple grades into kind of the what controls the machine or these kind of things without actually just kind of keeping track of like, okay, what is the machine doing?
Machine?
How can it do it? Yeah. So I mean, that's a lot of what takes my time these days.
Yeah.
And of course, I am also an experimental biologist, so it's also great to kind of tinker with things. But yeah, I mean, it's important to get a good descriptive understanding of what's going on to then say, okay, this is rooted in reality versus this is not.
Yeah. And you're in a lab where nobody else is working on bees, but they're all doing a lot of tracking and high tech visualizations of collective behavior. Can you tell me a bit about what it's been like to be in an environment like that?
Oh, it's been great. Yeah, no, I love like the Cousin Lab is a great lab to be in. It's phenomenal. It's great. I mean, the things you can see and people are doing is crazy. Like, for example, there's a group of researchers that are working. They're using drones to record zebras that are unmarked, and so they have these videos of zebra from above. And then they can use this posture tracking to basically like put pinpoints on the animal. And so you see this video of a drone from above, and then they can zoom in on this video. And all of a sudden you're like, wait, like there's a dot on the head, there's dots on the shoulders, there's dots on the tail. And this is all automated. So it's basically, you get an image, you train a network in order to detect these key points on an individual. And then once you've trained it, you can actually then use it in all these different case scenarios. So then they have these recordings and it's like, this is the zebra that's wagging its tail versus not. Its head is up, its head is down.
Wow. Can they tell individual zebras by the stripes?
So within one of the videos from above, they do maintain individual identities because, of course, they don't want to skip one individual to another. But between trips, when they go out on multiple trips, they can't necessarily say, okay, well, this is Susan that we saw on Thursday.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I would imagine that they could potentially use those stripes, like if they had like a kind of like an index book of who's whom.
Yeah.
But part of why I mentioned that, like that project in particular, is like I think of that as almost like an opposite side of the coin of what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm working with bees, insects inside of a nest, and looking at how they're using space and exploring their environment. And then this other group is using drones in the African savannah and looking at these gigantic zebras, but then they're also able to get these postures and kind of do interesting work in the same kind of way.
Right.
And like, okay, I love working with bees. I think bees are great, but would I ever, be in contact with people that are doing that kind of work? Like only in the Cousin Lab.
Yeah.
So, that's the cool thing.
Well, and I'm sure it has broadened your perspective on collective behavior, right? So bee and ant people tend to be very socially insect oriented. And so.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think, you know, the phrase that you're so dumb, you don't know how dumb you are.
Yes.
And I'm definitely not saying this about you, but you know, like there are cases where like you are so ignorant about a problem, you don't even know the extent of your ignorance. But what's nice about being in a lab like the Cousin Lab is you are at least exposed to the variation of what is possible.
Right.
And so it's a really nice place to be like, okay, you know, maybe I can't necessarily do this myself, or I would need some help to get this done. But I know that it is possible, and I know that it is within the realm of what is doable, as opposed to coming out and being like, okay, like I just have this magic plan. Which, you know, they say like any sufficiently advanced technology is basically indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, when you first dream it up.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, like Bluetooth speakers, like to be like, you know, you go back 100 years and say, okay, there's these speakers and there's nothing connecting them. Like someone, okay, you're a crazy person. So being in the Cousin Lab is it's been great. But it's, you know, it's Ian, but it's also just everyone it's everyone that's around, and that's just been, I'm a big fan.
So, and you're moving to Alabama to start your own lab. Rumor has it you're looking to attract graduate students and even pay them. What kind of students should apply? What are you looking for?
Oof. Yeah, I mean, you know, so I'm super excited to be going to Auburn, and I'll be starting the Smith Bee Lab, which...
Do you already have a logo?
Do we have a logo? Of course we have a logo. Have you not? Oh, you got to check. We've got a Twitter, Smith Bee Lab.
I have seen
and
it's
Twitter. It's a hexagon with a beautiful Bowie stripe, a David Bowie stripe.
I am recalling this now. Yes.
And so then it's got the logos in the blue and orange, which are the Auburn colors. But then it's got the hexagon, and it's got I highly recommend. So Smith Bee Lab is the Twitter, if that's what the people are, tweeters or whatever.
We'll put it in the show notes so people can find you.
Nice. But yeah, in terms of graduate students, like, yes, obviously it's a founding lab. It's an early on lab. It's definitely a bee lab. So, you know, that's kind of in the name. But I'm basically interested in recruiting any and all students that are curious about the social physiology of honeybee colonies and how bee colonies do what they do.
Okay.
And I'm definitely on the side of, you know, you should come in and develop your own project that works with the bees and follow some of these general kind of ideas. But I encourage students from any kind of walks. And that's also been like a really nice thing about being here in the Cousin Lab is there are physicists, there are mathematicians, there are computer scientists, there are engineers, there are biologists. There's really, everyone is all in that same realm. And so, like if someone came to me and said, hey, I'm a chemist, can I work with bees? It's like, if you're interested and curious and you want to work and do like a cool project that, you know, maybe you don't know what you want to do, but you know you want to do it, I'm happy to bring it and make it happen.
Very, very cool. And so you're not going to be micromanaging them, I take it. You're going to sort of let them maybe fall on their own ass just a tiny bit and then guide them to attain what they're seeking to attain.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be the counter argument with it. If you let people develop their own project that they could, you know, just fall on their face. I think there's a pretty good intermediate in there. I mean, I guess what I'm interested in is making sure that, you know, when you leave the lab, you have something that is your own to take with you.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, that can be hard, that you do have to develop it on your own. At the same time, like, you know, it's like, you know, at the end of the day, it's your project, it's your thing to explore and do whatever you wish. So yeah, I mean, I foresee myself having a pretty small lab. You know, total, not over 8 people at any given time.
Right.
And that includes myself, and that includes flunkies. I want to keep it on the small side. I say flunkies in a loving way, by the way. I don't mean that in a mean. No, that's great. I mean, yeah, to be a flunky, it's like, it's an appreciation for like, hey, like right now, it's the same phrase, like I'm a gopher, you know, go for this, go for that, go for sandwiches, go for whatever. But yeah, I think 8 people is a good manageable number where you can say, okay, some people are doing different things. And yeah, some people need more guidance, and that's totally okay. But I think if you come in and someone says, you're going to do this project. Like,
Right.
sure, you can develop it and build it on your own. But then when you leave, it's like, well, it wasn't my project. It was always like a given to me kind of thing.
Yeah, and then you're then in competition with your former advisor, and you're not always allowed to even pursue it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was, so at Cornell, I was in a neurobiology and behavior department. And a lot of those cases, you enter a lab and like they have a particular technique that they use, they have a particular system that they use. And yeah, like when you left, you could take with you your experience and your knowledge and everything. But at the end of the day, like, hey, I'm the person that does this
Right.
pathway in this system. And like, you're not gonna, like, you have no chance of really doing that on your own because,
Yeah.
like
You don't
the
have
other lab's already
you don't-
established.
Yeah. So are you going to be hiring a bee tech as well? Like,
No, I won't be hiring. I'm a fan of people. I think you learn a lot by actually doing your own bee work.
I agree.
I mean, I get so many. I mean, that's one of the things. You're going out there, you're kind of managing your bees.
Well,
Like for me, it's like I needed the bees for my experiments, right?
Yeah. But I think interacting with the bees also, you see things, you're like, why did they do that? And then you start thinking
Yeah.
about it, and it drives some of the questions that you end up investigating.
Yeah, and that's like the keeping your eyes open for things that happen out of the corner of your eye that are curious or interesting, and those end up being the things that maybe you end up doing later on or end up developing on your own. Like personally, one of the things one of like these side eye projects that kind of build into its own thing was looking at the comb building that was happening in queenless colonies.
Mm-hmm.
And it was totally by accident. It was, because I was doing the bee work myself. I was doing these experiments, and in some cases, unfortunately, the queen died because obviously it wasn't me. It was definitely someone else.
Yeah, I mean, obviously somebody else rolled her, and you came back and there were emergency cells. Mm-hmm.
I'm a professional.
I know.
Okay?
It would never happen to you.
It would never be me. But no, so a couple of these colonies, I was specifically looking at drone comb building in these experiments. And sure enough, a couple of these colonies lost their queen, and they just went crazy on drone comb. And so then that
So they knew
simple
they were
observation,
queenless. Yeah.
yeah. And so that simple observation, I was like, oh wow, like that's interesting. They're queenless, but these colonies were still rearing a new queen. So it's not that they were hopelessly queenless yet. And by hopelessly, I mean like they just have no chance. They were actually in the process. But even then, they were really keen on building this drone comb. And so then through that actual one observation, just out of chance, then led to these other experiments of actually looking at what stage of the requeening process do they revert back to building worker comb. And it turns out that these gals are, I mean, they're very attuned to the reproductive potential of their colony and their own status.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is that even when you had a queen that was mated, but not yet laying, the workers kept building drone comb. They only switched to building worker comb once that new queen starts laying worker eggs. And because, you can think of a lot of scenarios, okay, you rear a queen, but she dies in flight. Well, okay, then you need drone comb. The queen comes back, but isn't properly lated. Well, now you need drone comb. And so the kind of like catchphrase I used for that project was the bees were hoping for the best,
and planning
but preparing for the worst.
Very cool.
And hoping, because they are rearing a new queen. I mean, it's not that they're just completely throwing everything. They're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but they are kind of like,
just in case.
this baby, just in case, we'll just get this going.
That's fascinating.
And so no tech, but we'll be hiring a postdoc.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So the last question I always ask everybody on the show is, if you had to pick a pollinator avatar to represent you online, what would it be?
A pollination avatar to represent you online?
Some pollinator to represent you online.
Does everyone answer honeybees?
No. Surprisingly, very few people answer honeybees.
Like, obviously, I'd go with honeybees, right? I mean...
European honeybee, Apis mellifera.
Well, yeah, I mean, like...
That's totally fine. I'm just asking. Maybe you secretly, you're like, I'm an Apis dorsata kind of guy. They're just not where I live.
I mean, okay. They are... Don't tell anyone I said this, but Apis dorsata is pretty freaking cool.
Right?
I mean, they are super cool. But at the same time, it's like, working with them, I think, would be such a nightmare.
I don't know.
I mean, okay, for
you
certain
get to
things,
scale
yeah.
trees and
For certain
get to
things,
scale
yeah.
trees and visit interesting places. And yeah, it would be a bit of a nightmare, but it'd be fascinating.
Definitely fascinating. But yes, I think it was Guard Otis that was like, if you really want to know about bees, you should really go to Southeast Asia to see all the diversity of the different bees. And I've never been over there, and I'd like to do that at some point. But now I'm an Apis mellifera guy.
Through
I'm here for the long haul. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm kind of surprised your logo is not a bee on a bike.
That's a good idea for a logo. You know, actually, when we went through logos, this guy Mike Costello, he made the logo.
Okay.
And yeah, like he was so nice about, trying different things and doing different options, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, we eventually, the logo that we settled on, I wanted something that was really simple that I could draw if I needed to just like sketch it out.
Right.
And also the thing about like drawing a bee, like, the legs and everything. I mean, it can just get, but yeah, and for a logo, you want something, you got to put something that can be on a coffee mug or whatever. Yeah. And I was also thinking like people's posters, and also like, I definitely wanted a David Bowie aspect to it.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
No, thank you.
That was good. He's certainly very enthusiastic. It sounded like he was on a double latte espresso or something, double espresso latte during the interview. It was fun.
I'm not even sure he drinks coffee. He's just always high energy.
If he was here, you caught me at the very beginning because I do a lot of cycling. So what kind of cycle? You mentioned early on that he was on a bike. Does he bike also? Or it was just happened to be that one instance?
Oh, no. He is always on a bike. When he came to Berlin to visit the lab here and was staying at the Vico with me for a week, he took my bike, and he probably used it more in that week than I used it in the 6 months I was here. He's almost always on a bike. And he did show up at a conference with a tandem bike, and he showed up to dinner via tandem bike.
All right. Well, this isn't Cycling Today podcast. So he was talking, and I've gone out to the website after the interview, and he's does a lot with what I've seen you do also, or you've talked about pasting those little discs on the back of the bees with the little, it looks like hieroglyphics or little circles. Yeah, the circles and with the black dots on them. So can you talk a little bit about that? How does that work? And is that machine read? Is that visual? How is that?
Yeah, so no, I'd be happy to. It's actually 2 circles. So there's an inner circle, and that one's just divided in half. The top half is white, and the bottom half is black. So you always glue that tag on with the white half circle facing the bee's head, and that encodes directional information as to which way the bee is walking, since bees tend to walk forward and not backward. And then there's 12 bits all around, so 12 little segments in that outer circle, and they can either be black or white. And so it's a 12-bit binary code of zeros and ones, and so it will encode a number up from 0 to 4095, and so you have a bee identification code. And then there's actually an app you can install on your phone. You can take a picture of that code, and it will automatically spit out what number that tag is. And then they have automatically generated 4,096 names, all on the theme of bee. So they used an algorithm to generate all the fake names. So the video recordings. They're black and white imaging of the video recordings, and then those are processed, and they remove some of the noise and increase the contrast, and then via machine learning, those tags are automatically read, which is quite a difficult task because as a bee moves, that disc moves as well, and so it has to be able to recognize all 12 bits at all times, and then it creates these mini tracklets over time, and then those can be added on. So that you can follow the bee's trajectory over its entire lifetime. Wow.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's a whole team of computer programmers behind it. I am not the computer guru. There's 2 wonderful graduate students I work with at the lab here in Berlin, David Dormagen and Ben Wild, and they're the ones who have created and built on the prior work of others as well. And so they're helping me with my Varroa project.
That's really cool. That's fun. So who do you have coming up in future interviews?
I have a few interesting talks coming up, some interviews. One, I will be speaking with some of the women from Oregon who have experienced the wildfires and what impact that has had on bee forage and their own livelihoods. And then I'm also going to be speaking with a German commercial beekeeper who has gone abroad and done quite a bit of commercial work for New Zealand beekeepers and now has set up a Manuka import business to Germany. And so we'll be discussing some of his experiences and what it's like to be a commercial beekeeper in both Germany and in New Zealand.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Kirsten. Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever we download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let us know what you like. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We want to thank Strong Microbials for becoming the latest supporter of our podcast. Check out their probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on the show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else, Kirsten?
I just hope everybody has their bees ready for winter, and once they're broodless, if they do mite management, they can. I like the oxalic acid dribble method.
Very good. You heard it. Treat your bees for varroa. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.